Good morning, welcome back. This is Daybreak and thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. With me in studio is the only gentleman of the morning minus me. Joshua Okayo is the president of the Kenya School of Law. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you, Bwana Rais, and lovely having you here on the broadcast. Many thanks for making time. On my immediate right is Janice Mushemi. She is the program officer, the International Justice Mission. Good morning.
Good morning. And
good to have you.
For having me.
And welcome to the broadcast.
Thank
and
you.
Nora Bosibore is policy analyst with us in the studio. Nora, good morning.
Good morning, Ayub.
Thank you for finding time. And a lot to talk about, ladies and gentlemen. And this is in relation to one of the most transformative documents that this country has ever given itself. Katiba 2010, on Tuesday, we marked 14 years since it was promulgated in 2010. In it, of course, is the prescription of our governance problems, largely informed by our dark past. But first, to you, Joshua, looking at the conduct of those who have been given the responsibility to implement it, have we lived by its very dictates and principles which ought to border on good governance, including the Bill of Rights, respect for human rights, principles of good governance and constitutionalism? What's your assessment so far?
Thank you, Ayub. And I think it's important I make it known that today is the International Day of Victims of Enforced Disappearance.
Yeah.
And one of the stories that you covered is one of enforced disappearance or abduction of, I think, some members of a family in Kitengela. And these are violations, gross violations of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Now, Kenyans, we had a constitution that served us for about 60 years, from 1969 to 2009. Actually, 2010, 26th August. So until then, Kenyans had experienced so many challenges. And part of these challenges were things like enforced disappearances. And we also had misconduct by police, where we had police force.
Yeah.
And so Kenyans were of the opinion that let us have a police service, a professionally run police service that is of the service to people, and not a force that you know, when people see their uniforms, run away. At the same time, Kenyans were tired of you know, centralized form of governance where funds are at one point.
Yeah.
You have to seek the audience of the president to get development in Siaya or to get development in Nyeri. So that then the Kenyans decided, let us have a devolved system of governance so that our leaders are more accessible to and they can actually handle stuff independently. At the same time, Kenyans decided that it's time we implement the provisions of international law insofar as human rights are concerned. And that, you know, brought us the Bill of Rights. So that we have a very extensive Bill of Rights that speaks from, you know, economic matters, social matters, to name it, everything. So far, we have a very transformative constitution, a constitution that has been celebrated world over, and people actually compare our constitution to that of the United States of America. It's true we have a very transformative constitution,
okay,
but we do not have what we have called constitutionalism, where we have principles of governance, principles of, you know, I mean, the rule of law, we have integrity, we have all those principles outlined in Article 10. But then we do not see that get its foot on the ground, so that we have something that outlines how public servants or state officers should conduct themselves in governance.
Okay.
But then that is not seen. They are actually acting contrary to the provisions of the Constitution. We have a very young Constitution, the second born of our legal system in Kenya.
Yeah.
But then it is being mutilated. And people, especially those in power, are taking the provisions of this Constitution for a ride. You know, they're taking it for granted. So that then what is done is very opposite to what is said.
Okay, and what's needed, is it? Janice, this is a very important day, especially in the context of people who have been forcibly disappeared. And yesterday night, the president in Kisumu County, when he engaged locals in the county of Kisumu, said he's not aware of any. And if they are, then that should be brought to his attention. It tells us a lot about, is it the government's conduct since, especially when we had the protests that had charged up from 18th June to 25th when Parliament was breached, the address by the president on Tuesday, the withdrawal of the finance bill on Wednesday, and the difference in the body language. But do you buy the argument that the government wasn't aware or isn't aware that there are Kenyans who have been disappeared? Yet we have covered stories of, for example, just but the example, which is a microcosm of the 3 missing Kenyans from Kitengela.
Yes, thank you. You've indeed put it right that today is an important day because it is set aside globally to recognize the victims of enforced disappearance. That is the 30th of August. And I'd like to also sympathize with the families of the 3 who do not know where their kin is. The Constitution guarantees us various rights under the Bill of Rights, as my colleague has put it, under Chapter 4. And these victims have come out to state that their kin were taken 10 days ago. They've been to various stations and they've not received any feedback. And the state has a responsibility to respond to their query or their complaint. I might not understand why the president put it that, because even the media has been at the front light showcasing various people who are crying that their kin are missing. Our National Rights Institute, that is the Kenya National Commission of Human Rights, revealed a very disturbing report of victims during the protest. And up to 50 people are reported disappeared. We do not know where they are. So indeed, this is a live situation that we are facing as a country, and we need to act on it, starting with the state agencies that are responsible to investigate and give people a remedy as to where their persons are.
Okay.
Yes.
Nora, we all appreciate that our constitution is transformative, but are our leaders transformative in mind and in soul generally to implement it fully as to what it prescribes as the medicine to our problems?
Thank you, Ayub, for having me. First of all, let's reflect on this day of the 14th anniversary of the promulgation of the Constitution. We first have to understand that Kenyans are growing more frustrated and hopeless despite having the most transformative and progressive constitutions in the world. And of course, this has been attributed to the violations of the Constitution, both in letter and in the spirit. Of course, the drafters of the 2010 Constitution thought that independent institutions would safeguard provisions. But of course, currently now we are grappling with issues to do with negligence, abuse of power, and weaponization of institutions. Ayub, we've been here talking about public finance management, corruption, integrity, and even the Bill of Rights. But we've realized that the government and the executive is actually now using institutions to weaponize institutions so that they can stifle the rights of political leaders and people who are against them. A few days ago, Ayub, we realized and we saw in full glare of the televisions how there was a travesty of justice when Governor Mwangaza was impeached. You know, so this asks the questions. Are institutions set by the Constitution safeguarding our rights, or they're stifling it? Because at the end of the day, for example, the prerogatives granted to the MCAs, whereby they can be able to impeach governors that are not performing, is being used casually. Because Ayub, you cannot be, called upon to answer to flimsy charges, and then everybody agrees. Even the Senate itself agrees that these charges do not hold any water. And then 2 hours to voting, we were informed by Ototsi that there was a call from higher powers, and that impeachment took place. So this means then that we have to relook these prerogatives. We have to relook these fundamental institutions, because at the end of the day, we are grappling with greedy politicians who can take advantage of the powers bestowed on them to subvert the will of the people. So for me, I can say that the people, democracy backsliding actually starts at the ballot box. I do not even want to entirely blame the leadership because it reflects on us, the people in general. For example, are our people fully equipped to gauge the character of people we elect to office? Are our people fully equipped to gauge the structure of our constitution? Do our people understand the constitution? Has the constitution been taught to what is the civic duty of IEBC? Have they done their duty properly? Because I can quote, for example, Professor Rosenberg, he's a psychologist in the University of California. He says that democracy will devour itself, burdened by its structural constraints. And we have already been seeing structural constraints like corruption, like mismanagement of funds, and eventually we might lose everything. We might even lose the country. So as people are going around the country trying to galvanize support in other bases, we might not even have people to vote in 2027. So we have to relook even our collective aspirations as a country and see if indeed we are also the problem as a people.
All right, we'll talk about 2027 because it's an opportunity that many across the world are very eager to have, but we are privileged to have it because we know when we are going to vote, but how we vote and who we vote in is also a factor that we have to discuss here. But Joshua, talking about enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, and the employment of force on peaceful protesters by security agencies. To put this day into context, you are a victim during that protest. And there are many Kenyans who have been forcibly abducted by people who had no identification numbers or service numbers, who are in unmarked vehicles, and they say that they are security officials. What was your experience, and what then is your message to the government that's now saying, come out if you have undergone such, so that we start documenting, which clearly is more or less is a flimsy sort of a reason to be given?
Yeah, it's very sad that the president, who is the head of the state, says that he has no reports of abducted individuals or missing individuals. And let me, 2 weeks ago, I was at Mukuru kwa Ruben, and we went to condole with a family of a guy who went missing on, I think, 19th of June, and then was found in Kericho, in a morgue in Kericho. And that is just one particular example that I experienced in the recent past. Now, what happened is that, of course, I was part of the team that was very actively involved in organizing and bringing, heads together for us to be able to have a successful revolution, we called it. So, and it happened that on the day of the 25th, 2 of the lawyers who are training to be advocates at Kenya School of Law had been abducted early in the morning, around 5 a.m. And so when they went missing, the report reached me, and I released a statement. I said that we are demanding for immediate and unconditional release of the 2. And we also called off the classes that were ongoing and encouraged our other fellows to join the movement, because it was now apparent that we have a regime that is against us, and especially the young people. So, but before then, I think on 20th, the Thursday before, I had also made a statement, a bold statement about IMF and World Bank being at the forefront, or rather, fronting the Finance Bill 2024. And these were part of the questions that these abductors were asking me, and especially they were more interested in my statement about World Bank and IMF. So I had received calls, 3 of them. 2 I received, 1 I didn't, because it was apparent that someone is now after me, and they were saying the same language: wherever you are, don't leave. So when I heard that, I was like, this is not normal. I decided to leave, because I felt like these are people who are coming after me, so I need to be out of this place. Little did I know that these guys were actually around, so that they wanted probably to locate me or something. So when I left, just a few meters from home, they grabbed me, got me into a car, and drove off. So these guys kept me for almost 48 hours, without food, without water, without nothing. And they kept asking me questions as to who is funding us in terms of, you know, the merchandise, the transport, organization, whatever, you name it, water, everything. And of course, the matters IMF. So after that, they kept hitting me at intervals, you know, coming in, because at some point they put me in some room. I'm not going to tell that story as it is, but I'm just trying to make it short. But they could come in at intervals and hit me and asking me the same question so I could give them answers that I didn't have. So when they realized I didn't have these answers, I think they got me out of the room where I was, drove off, got me out, threw me, of course, unmasked my head. They uncuffed me and they went. But then we thank God I'm out. We have quite a number of us who have not been found to date. And we have some who went missing and were found dead. Like I remember the same day that I went missing, Denzel Omondi went missing the same day. And unfortunately, he was found dead, all right, in some quarry dam. So these are real issues. These are real experiences. And these experiences is a lived experience. So when the president says that he is not aware of any case of abduction or he's not aware of any case of enforced disappearance, it is very sad, and I would advise the president to sit down, reflect on his leadership, and reflect on the occurrences in the past 3 months, and actually decide, now that he calls himself a very prayerful man, please let him sit down, pray, and get back to the person that we thought he was before.
Okay. And Janice, then, does the account given by the government add up in regards to the people who have been forcibly disappeared, some found dead, others like Okayo having survived the ordeal and what they went through? And what then is you are thinking into this, given that these abductions happened in full glare of the public's eye? And how then can this conversation be moved forward for the government to abandon its position of not knowing what has been happening, yet it knows, to the position of now talking about how to end that? Because if you look at our president, he campaigned on the promise that there will be no more bodies that will be found on rivers, there will be no more enforced disappearances, and that was a campaign promise that he made, which unfortunately he and his government are struggling to sustain, because the very same issues appear to be, again, happening.
Yes. You know, the issue with enforced disappearance is a very unique kind of crime, because you're talking about deprivation of liberty, as what happened with my brother, by state agents or persons who are sent by the state. And then they refuse to acknowledge that they have you, but most importantly, you're held outside the law. So when my brother was taken, the rights of an arrested person should have automatically come into place. But as you hear, he doesn't know where he was. He was treated to inhumane and degrading treatment for 2 days, and he had no communication with his people. And unfortunately, in Kenya, we do not have a national law that deals with enforced disappearance. And this is one of the failures that we as Kenyans have, that we've not given our criminal justice sector a law that they can criminalize enforced disappearance. And that is why we're having issues of people denying that it actually happens in our country. And enforced disappearance is closely connected with extrajudicial killings, because, as he said, fortunately, he's alive to tell what happened to him. Not all victims are brave and courageous as Joshua. There are some victims who do not want to talk at all because of the fear that has been instilled with them. Their family members do not want to follow up on cases because they're scared of the state, who can go up against the state. But there are those who lose their lives, and now it becomes extrajudicial killings. And 14 years after promulgation of a constitution which has a very good Bill of Rights, this is not a good picture for the country. And that's why we call upon criminalization of ED, enforced disappearance, through a national law. We've already signed the convention, but we've not ratified it. We signed it in 2006. 2024, we've not ratified it, meaning we've not domesticated it to be part of our laws. So when persons like Joshua go to complain, it's recorded in the OB as missing persons, but it is not missing persons. He was held outside the law, and there are rights and violations that were meted on him, and he deserves justice as a victim.
All right.
So we call upon victims to come forward. There are very many institutions that have been formed thanks to our new constitution, because there are some wins with our new constitution. We have Independent Policing Oversight Authority that are mandated to investigate such instances. We have Witness Protection Agency that can protect people who are coming out to complain of human rights violations. Yes.
Thank you. When we get back from the break, Nora, we also talk about the issue of governance and what appears to be happening in the Nyanza region. The president is there, so are the allies of the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. What then is the view of the young people, given the problems they face and what appears to be the regrouping of the political class, and a look into how their political path looks like, because they are focused on 2027, but there are deep underlying issues that have not been substantively addressed, including the welfare of the young people. And you talked about 2027, so we put that into context and how the young people can do the required change at the ballot. The hashtag on next is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. More after the break here on the broadcast. Stay tuned.